We have a bit of a special piece now, because Newcastle United are one of those clubs that we haven't quite covered in depth, the same as maybe Arsenal, United, Liverpool over recent weeks. Delighted to say the former Irish international goalkeeper Shay Given joins us on the line this morning. Morning, Shay, how are things?
Good morning, lads. You okay?
Keeping well. Thanks for coming on to us. 354 caps for Newcastle, so we figured you'd be the right man to discuss their current form and rise with. Things are going really well for Eddie Howe. Third place in the table. It's all looking up.
Yeah, it's been an unbelievable season. You think of the last 12 months even, Shane, it's been remarkable. Where they've come from. I think they were second bottom when he took over. And I think the biggest problem for everyone connected to Newcastle or played for Newcastle or any connection with the club was, stay in the division, because the championship's so difficult to get out of. And the job he's done, the recruitment, I think last January and the summer has been phenomenal. Not went mental in the market, just got the right people and the right mentality, the right sort of character to the football club, and it's just snowballed really. The season they're having, third in the league. And you're right to talk about them, and maybe not in the title race, but definitely in the Champions League places. If they can finish in the top four and perhaps win a League Cup, then it would be an unbelievable season.
Do you think they are? Like, I was listening to Gary Neville's podcast after the match of the weekend, and he was kind of saying he believes City will win the league, Manchester United might finish second, Arsenal third, Newcastle fourth. Is there any hope that Newcastle can get involved in this title race?
I think Eddie would probably, probably quietly maybe think there's an outside chance, but I think Arsenal looks so good at them. Gary Neville maybe saying that to try and mount more pressure on Arsenal perhaps, or maybe take the pressure off Arsenal. I don't know what his psychology is, but after watching Arsenal at the weekend, they were brilliant against Tottenham. Of course, they've got to play Man City twice yet, which will be massive games, of course. But Arsenal, I don't think will fear anyone at the minute the way they're playing. They've been absolutely brilliant. Their confidence is sky high. The club, the fans, everyone's right behind them. So I think it'll be very difficult to claw that back. And whatever reason at City, it seems to be not going so good at the minute. There seems to be something missing, a little spark, whatever it might be. But Newcastle, even if they finish fourth, the Gary Neville's prediction's right, and Newcastle finish fourth, that will be just a brilliant season. It really would. And then, rebuild again perhaps in the summer, a few more players, not loads of rebuilding, just one or two players to add to this group of players and help strengthen this team. And it's very exciting. I think the biggest thing that Newcastle fans have is hope again. There's a real optimism around the city that the good times are ahead again, and hopefully that's the case.
Shay, you touched on the quality of the signings, and none of them are like monster names necessarily that were hugely sought after by some of the bigger clubs. You spent about 200 million quid. The names have been monster successes. Having said that, the likes of Guimarães, Trippier, Nick Pope, of course, Dan Burn, the list goes on, and we've spent plenty of time in this show talking about the source of where that money has come from. Having said that, there are other clubs with just as deep pockets who spent the money badly. In that context, will you talk to us a bit about Howe's role in the transfers, and where would you rate him at the minute in terms of Premier League managers?
Well, he's got to be up there. People said at the start he's just maybe be a stopgap, or maybe just for some big name manager to come in, But I think in any conversation now, I think Eddie Howe's a big name manager. I think the job he's done, he's surpassed probably most expectations even of the owners. I wouldn't have thought that. I think the Tottenham game, the very first game they were in charge, was Tottenham at home, and they got beat. I was actually at the game. It was the atmosphere before the game was phenomenal, but there was a realisation after the game that there's a big rebuilding job to do here, and they've done that. They've backed him, of course, and I think Eddie Howe is he deserves this sort of the positive stuff that's said about him, because you can only talk about second bottom and now third in the league, and that's after a long period of time. So you just hope that can continue. I kind of sort of hinted the other day that maybe they could dip into the market now in January, because the position they're in, to be third in the league now, it doesn't guarantee in 12 months' time they'll be third in the league, because they always say strike when the iron's hot. Maybe now's the time to get one or two players through the door to really sort of cement the top four position, because the job for Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe come the summertime will be made a lot easier if you're in the Champions League next season.
You're hearing a lot of names being linked, Shay, as will be the case with Newcastle over the coming years. But the Chelsea trio, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Conor Gallagher, Hakim Ziyech, maybe Ziyech being the one that Chelsea might most willingly part with. Scott McTominay is another name as well. I guess when you see Bruno Guimarães leaving the field in tears after twisting his ankle at the weekend, it highlights the need for maybe some building in central midfield, albeit I think his injury isn't maybe as bad as first feared. It could be weeks as opposed to months. Who do you think they should bring in, or what sort of areas of the pitch would you like to see Eddie Howe strengthen?
Well, when you first seen the Bruno injury, you thought it was going to be a lot more serious, and hopefully, as you're right, the reports coming back that's hopefully only weeks and not months that he's going to be out for, because he's such an important player. He's been an absolute inspirational signing, should we say, as well from day one, and he's a fan's favourite already. So hopefully it's not long term. But where would you like to strengthen? Probably in midfield. When you see, I think probably the Sheffield Wednesday game when they lost in the FA Cup was one of them ones you thought, is the squad is good enough to be a Champions League squad, perhaps even for next season, or this home straight the second half of the season, an extra couple of players could help strengthen the squad, because when they made, I think it was 8 changes against Sheffield Wednesday, it looked like it showed a bit. There's a lot of players who have not played much football, and I think the squad and depth might not be there as maybe some of the bigger teams in the top 4 are challenging for the top 4. So I wouldn't say exact positions. I think the back 4 have been brilliant. The goalkeeper's been amazing. So probably midfield and maybe higher up the pitch, perhaps. But you don't want to rock the boat too much when you're doing so well as well. It's a fine sort of balance to get that right. Do we leave it how it is because we're doing so well, or do we add a little bit of competition for places?
I guess the desire for a trophy, Shay, in Newcastle, I mean, as you well know, it's a town that loves its football. Like Intertoto Cup in 2006, and before that you had the FA Cup in 1955, so it's not a club that has experienced much success in the way of silverware. Like, into the Carabao Cup semi-finals now, is that something that's going to be firmly on Eddie Howe's mind, that look, it would be a lovely, lovely season, not only to clinch top 4 but maybe pick up a Carabao Cup trophy as well? Yeah,
I mean, that'd be amazing. I mean, I was at the quarter-final there, the last game, and the atmosphere before and after the game actually was phenomenal against Leicester. So obviously Southampton's a draw, you would think, in the semi-final, home and away. I think the second leg's at St James's Park as well. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy, because Southampton, obviously, the recent results in recent weeks have picked up, but you would like to think that Newcastle will have enough for to get through that. And then obviously final, anyone can win a final, can't they? It's a bit of luck on the day, but it's exciting times again. As I said, the crowd are really behind the team and the manager, and there's a real buzz in the city. So it would be amazing. It would be an unbelievable season, top 4, and to pick up a trophy. As you say, it's been far too long. I mean, I was there for nearly 12 years of my life, and every year was the same thing. Can we win a trophy? Can we finally do it? We got to 2 FA Cup finals, I think a semi-final, a UEFA Cup as well, I think it was, or whatever it was called. They changed the name all the time, but we were close, but we just didn't get our hands on one. So it's very frustrating. But you just think with this crop of players, with the new ownership, with the backing that hopefully Eddie will get, then hopefully it's not a million miles away.
Speaking of the new ownership, Shay, and you're obviously out and around the club and you're in touch, I'm sure, with a lot of Newcastle fans. There was so much chat about it at the start, and the source of the money, and how should we feel about this, I suppose. Is everybody around Newcastle just, the money's there, the new owners are in, we're getting on with this and we're going to win trophies, or is there any chat about the source of the money?
Well, I don't live in Newcastle, but I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be people who will object to it. I mean, but there's other clubs in the Premier League that have got money from places maybe they shouldn't have before. I don't want to go into too much depth on it, but I think that what's happened with the previous ownership, I think they're just excited that there's someone who's up to, who are prepared to back the team, prepared to try and get the club challenging again at the top of the league. So whatever you say on here, or any sort of social, or any sort of media, then people will spin it and say you're whatever. I can't really say the words, but there's always going to be, objections to that, So, but I mean, personally, on a footballing point of view and a sporting point of view, I think it's, and again, people will spin this whatever way they want as well. It's exciting again for the football club. I say it's been doom and gloom for a long, 12, 13 years under the previous ownership, and it seems now that sort of cloud's been lifted and there's excitement again through the city.
You almost feel, Shay, that there's a bit of a shift around Newcastle, even in terms of big teams. Luck seems to follow them around, and the Mitrovic penalty at the weekend was a perfect example of that, where you need a moment to kind of go your way to pick up 3 points. And even towards the end of the game, I remember back in August when Liverpool got the late goal and Newcastle were trying to kind of play out the game and run down the clock. It's a risk. But at the weekend, that little bit of shithousery where, Dan Byrne is holding the ball over his head for the Fulham players trying to swipe it out of his hands. All of a sudden, all these little moments are going Newcastle's direction.
Well, if you stood next to Dan Byrne, you'd do well to get a ball off his hands. He's 6'7", so need a step ladder, I think. But yeah, I mean, you're probably right when you say about the Mitrovic penalty at the weekend. It was just one of those unfortunate things for probably Mitrovic. But you think at times, I tweeted after the game, something's brewed in Newcastle, because there's little moments in seasons where things like that happen, because if Fulham get their noses in front, 1-0, they probably sit more defensively and be more difficult to break down, and that the goal might not have come at the end, and that goal would have been just for 1 point instead of 3 points as well. So you just believe that there's little moments, key moments, as you say, call it a bit of luck, call it whatever you want. But it's still a long way to go. I mean, we get excited because they've been there now for a few weeks, but there's a lot of games to play. There's a lot of big matches that come up, a lot of big teams to play against. So there's a lot of football still to be played, and there's a lot of stories to be told yet, So it's not over yet. There's a long way to go.
There was a big debate in the studio, Shay, before we came on air this morning about who was the best goalkeeper at Newcastle since Shay Given and whether or not it was Nick Pope. We might as well. You're the expert in the area.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's opinion in different eras and what have you, But what you would say about Nick Pope, he's just been, a breath of fresh air to the football club. I think was it 10, maybe 11 million they got, and sort of seemed to go under the radar as well, Adrian, with a lot of people. He just sort of slipped through the door and okay, he's here now, and there wasn't so much fuss made about him. And then he's just been absolutely phenomenal. His record, I think, I've seen somewhere 11 Premier League goals they've conceded all season, or something along them. I don't quote me on the exact number, but that record with the back four. You look at the back four. Dan Burn, Botman's been a brilliant signing. Of course, Cher looks a different player under Eddie Howe, and of course Trippier. You mentioned before about his leadership qualities. He's a captain. He's just, I think, the first signing as well under the new owners as well. He's brought so much to the football club. So I think then back four and back five, with Nick Pope's been absolutely superb. And I think you need that base if you're going to do anything in the Premier League, and they've definitely got that.
Yeah, 5th clean sheet in a row, I think, for Nick Pope, which is a record at top flight level, which is not bad at all.
I'll get me coat then. I'll get me coat.
No, not bad. Alexander Isak, another name as well, Shay, that's really popped up, and his game time, I know, has been limited by injuries, but his strike rate in terms of goals, I think it's a goal every 89 minutes that he's been in a Newcastle jersey when he has been on the pitch. So really, really big bright spark. Yeah.
I was at his debut actually at Anfield when he scored 2, and possibly should have had a hat-trick because there was a marginal big toe was offside or something, and one of the goals got disallowed, in the second half. But yeah, I mean, he had a bad injury, and he's as Eddie says, in the last couple of weeks, he's just trying to get him back up to speed. Of course, the goal at the weekend will do him no harm at all, or his confidence no harm either, But again, it's exciting. Wilson's playing really well at the minute as well, and some people are talking, could Wilson and Isak play together up front? That would be, we don't see that very often, 2 strikers, but maybe Eddie might change his formation a little bit, perhaps with maybe Bruno missing for a couple of weeks. It might give him that option to play both of them. I don't know, but it's exciting. He's we didn't know much about him before he signed, but we certainly knew a lot about him after his debut. He looked very sharp. He looks a finisher as well, and looks a natural finisher too. So, I'm looking forward to seeing him play in the coming weeks.
And he's maybe capitalising on a slight dip in form for Alan Saint-Maximin, someone who we know is extremely talented, but he's really jumped on that bandwagon, Isak, when Saint-Maximin hasn't maybe been at his best.
Yeah, perhaps, and I think Saint-Maximin's been fit now for the last 3 or 4 weeks as well, and not really getting the game time, so I don't know, maybe if he's, I don't know, you don't know, obviously you're just speculating from outside the sort of changing room and what have you, but you would have thought he would have got more football, and as I say, you said with Bruno missing the next couple of weeks, it might be interesting to see how Eddie sort of reshuffles his pack. We'll see Maximum come in, will Isak start up with Wilson? There's lots of different things that he has to sort of work out now, Eddie, in the next couple of weeks, but Maximum on his day can be world class, and then on other days he can be frustrating. I think that's the thing, is trying to get the consistency, what St. Maximum's going to turn up, but when he can play at the level we know he can, he's a brilliant player. Marcus
Rashford definitely offside.
Oh my God, don't get me started on that. How long have I got in this show? I've got all morning if you want, lads, to be honest. I just can't get my head around that goal, and I spoke about it in the last couple of days as well, and people going, because you played for Man City, blah 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 blah. It's nothing to do with Man City. It's nothing to do with, if a Newcastle striker had scored it or Haaland had scored it, I'd be saying the exact same. It makes a farce of the whole game. In fact, it's just, I don't know what it's probably been spoke about. He's interfering with plays, not interfering. Of course, he's interfering with play. Ederson's the goalkeeper. Position I know pretty well. I'd like to think was coming out down the line of the shot with Rashford running onto the ball. He was getting set for that. He wasn't getting set for Bruno Guimarães. Fernandes coming onto the ball to finish the goal. And then they say he's not interfering because he's not touched the ball. He's nearly jumped out of the way for Bruno to score. So. Of course he's interfering with play. Of course he's interfering even with the back line. Kanji sort of stepping up, playing him offside. It's just, it's a bit of a farce. I mean, they have to clarify. I know there's a law in place, and if you don't touch the ball and what have you. I think even go back a few weeks when Salah scored for Liverpool. It's a different goal. It's not a City man. It's not a goal against Man City or Newcastle, for example. It's, I think the Wolves defender headed it because he was trying to block it from going to Salah. It goes to Salah and he scores and they give it. That's a farce. That goal should be given offside.
What do you make of Man City, generally speaking, at the minute, Shay? Because, I mean, result notwithstanding, the performance was okay. I mean, Fred really clearly had a job to do on Kevin De Bruyne, which he did quite well in the first half. Haaland didn't have much. He probably needs the City players to get the ball to him more, although it was quite difficult at Old Trafford at the weekend, given United's setup. But you wouldn't be too concerned. Arsenal's form is really, really good, but you feel that City have that bubble and that spell still in them.
Well, they do. They're champions for a reason, and these guys have been there before. They're a brilliant squad of players, and they'll be hurting at the minute because the results. Southampton, of course, losing to Southampton in the League Cup as well, and then going out losing the Manchester Derby. So these guys will be hurting, and you'll expect a response. Fred done a brilliant job on De Bruyne. I was at the game, actually, the Brentford game before the World Cup when Thomas Frank went to the Etihad and really, I think they nearly double marked De Bruyne that day to try and stop the service to Haaland, and there was a real game plan to, if you can stop the source, then you stop Haaland getting goals, So, Pep and his staff will have to work that out. How do we maybe free up De Bruyne, or if a couple of players are on De Bruyne, is there space for the likes of Mahrez or Grealish or Foden or whoever else that he plays, or Silva or whatever team he picks, So they'll have to rejig it a bit perhaps to get the spark back. But I think, as I said, these guys are champions for a reason. They've won the Premier League so many times in the last 5 or 6 seasons, so they definitely won't be giving up the ghost, should we say. They'll be definitely chasing Arsenal all the way to the end.
I saw Stuart Pearce making a good case, and it was stood out from the noise in defence of Hugo Lloris on TalkSport yesterday in the North London Derby, talking about the fact that it takes a deflection. What's your take on it?
Yeah, it does take a deflection. It's difficult because any goal that goes in and a goalkeeper hits his chest or whatever and it rebounds into the net, then it's, people will just automatically point the finger at the goalkeeper. And also it doesn't help, and this doesn't sound like a goal. It's going to be a goalkeepers union conversation, but it's like, it's happened so quick, and then when they show it, it's a split second type thing, and sometimes you don't even see the ball and it hits off a part of your body, and before you know it, it's in the net. You don't even realise which part of your body is hit or nothing. It happens so quick. And the thing with TV and slow motions and stuff, and people are sitting back on their sofa and thinking, "Gee, I would have saved that." It's just, it's not easy. I'm not saying I'm not saying he shouldn't have saved it. I'm not saying it's a glaring error, but you'll be disappointed when you look back. Hugo will be disappointed himself. If he stays maybe more square to the ball, it might hit his chest and come back in the direction it came, and he's just turned his chest a little bit, and that's gone into the net. But it happens so quick, and it's milliseconds or whatever it is. It's very difficult to react sometimes. And it's like hard for keepers as well, isn't it? Because you're like, that's the ultimate. A defender makes a slip and it's grand. It probably gets covered. Somebody else mops it up. Goalkeeper makes a slip and he's living with that. He's listening to that. He's looking at that for the next couple of weeks. And again, it's a big derby as well. So there's a big pressure in that position. Of course, the goalkeeper is, as you say, is the last line of defence. There's no one there to bail you out behind. And being there myself, I've made mistakes. It's not a nice place to be. But again, it's the psychology of a goalkeeper. The sports psychologists, I'm sure they have at Tottenham and different people who've been working with Hugo Lloris. You've got to park that to one side, of course, for the rest of the game, and then maybe after the game you can address it, sit down in the cold light of day and think, what would you have done different, and how could you have maybe reacted differently, or what would you have done differently perhaps the next time, So it's all dealing with the mental side of the game as much as anything. Having said all that, with my Irish hat on, I'll make a case for Caoimhín Kelleher to get out of Liverpool, who are going backwards, and good time to jump ship and a good place for him to go. What's your sense of what, if you were to give him advice, if he was to call you up and say, Shay, what are you thinking, what should I do here, what would you say to him? Yeah, well, I think Caoimhín doesn't need advice from me or anyone else, but I would always be the opinion of to get playing. Obviously, that would be my. I left Donegal all those years ago at 16 and had a choice of going to Man United or Glasgow Celtic, and I picked Glasgow Celtic because I felt there was a better chance of getting into the team. Packy Bonner was getting on a bit. Hopefully, Packy's not watching, but at the time I felt he was more of a chance of getting in there, whereas Peter Schmeichel was just sort of coming into his prime at Man United. So we felt that. Me and my dad felt that was the avenue we wanted to take. We wanted to play as many first team games as possible, and I always felt when I didn't play, even if it was in the squad and I was on the bench or whatever, I was raging. I was like, that's a game I will never get back in my life, in my career, that I can't turn the clock back. So Queven will be, I would imagine, will be itching to get playing, and even from a Liverpool point of view, Alisson's an unbelievable goalkeeper. So I always have the argument, because I've been asked this a few times of a few different people, is like, there's no harm letting him go to the end of the season, for example, now to play games, and that's, even puts up his price tag, for example, because I've got every faith that he would do brilliant wherever he goes. He's at the age, he's at the level where he could play, I think, I wouldn't even just say Championship, I would say, Premier League. I think he's at that level. And of course, Gavin's doing great at Southampton as well. So, Queven will be looking at thinking, I need to get playing games, So I think there could be some sort of a good deal for both Liverpool and Queven to get him some game time.
It's fascinating what you're saying there, Shay, about the psychology of a goalkeeper, because you're in a team sport and yet you're an individual really in that team, because as you say, if a mistake is on your back, it's entirely down to you. Like we had Ronan O'Gara recently with us, and look, kind of similar for a fly half in rugby, that you're in a team sport, but again you're an individual, especially when you're on the kicking tee. And Ronan, I mean, he made my morning when he said Ronnie O'Sullivan was one of his sports heroes, and he was big into the darts as well. It seemed fascinating to me that he was gravitating towards individual sports and even maybe golfers as well. Are you someone similar who has maybe as a goalkeeper gravitated towards individual sports people?
Well, I do like golf. I like the golfers, to be fair. Obviously the Irish guys, McIlroy and Shane Lowry, who I met a few weeks back, actually, great guy. You just hope he has a great year ahead of him, of course. But growing up probably was more of football. I was growing up as a kid and was always like, who do you look up to as a footballer? And Peter Schmeichel was probably the one I looked up to most when I was a kid. And it was kind of like, who could you learn from, or who do you think you could emulate to try and be, or have some sort of a figure that you could look at and think, well, what do I need to do to get to that level, or to even, be anywhere close to that level, So I think it's good for kids to have that sort of aspirations, or it doesn't have to be even in their sport, or individuals, I don't know what's trying to say, inspirations that people, dedication, and people who sometimes maybe weren't the most gifted in their sport, but they've just thrown their whole life and into it, and they've actually been brilliant at what they've done, and that's, what is it, hard work beats talent or something, or there's a saying in there somewhere, as you probably help me out, but
no, that's it.
It's something for kids to aspire to be, and that's what I was like when I was growing up. It was like, I used to look at maybe all the top goalkeepers, but probably Peter Schmeichel was the one I thought, what an unbelievable goalkeeper he was. And lucky enough at one stage, he was at the other end of the pitch to me, playing against him, so that was a bit surreal. But I think it's important you look up to these people.
Just a final one for me, Shane. You've been very good with your time. The Aaron Ramsdale situation at the weekend, brilliant performance in the North London derby from him. There were those unsavoury scenes towards the end where a Spurs fan kicks him in the back, and you can see him kind of having a little bit of aggro with the Spurs fans throughout the game. Like, is that a tough thing, and maybe from your own experience as well, where you're standing in your goal and you have the opposition fans right behind you hurling abuse at you for 90 minutes plus? Not an easy thing, and probably, I assume, quite difficult for a goalkeeper not to react to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, you'd be getting abused the whole game. I've played at, obviously, the Manchester derby, the Newcastle, Sunderland derbies. You at away, especially at the away stadiums, you're getting, it's 90, 95 minutes of absolutely, whatever they can throw at you. You can't stay on here, of course. The stuff that Ramsdale would have had to put up with at the weekend, but when you win a big derby, I think you should be allowed as a player to enjoy that moment. That's why you work hard and you dedicate yourself and your life to the profession. Is to celebrate the moment and enjoy the moment. So I think for a fan to come on like that is disgusting, really. He kicked him in the back, which was bad enough. But imagine he had a knife or something or anything. It's some Tottenham fans think, oh, you're going over the top there, perhaps. But at the same time, these guys, the family men, they've got kids and stuff, and it's people's lives is risk, and that might be a bit strong on my point, but you just don't know in the current climate. If someone has something that they shouldn't have into the stadium, then the players on the pitch should not be at any sort of risk, so you don't like to see that at any stadium.
Yeah, 100%. Here. Shay, really good at your time. Thanks a million as always this morning.
Thanks, Shay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Great stuff. Shay Given there, former Republic of Ireland international goalkeeper.